My name doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what I saw, what I heard, what I can never unsee. I was a Levite, born into the lineage, raised in the shadow of the temple walls, trained from childhood to serve in the holiest place on earth. My family had served for generations, carriers of the ark, singers of psalms, guardians of sacred rituals. But I was chosen for something else. I was chosen to blow the shofar. It sounds simple, doesn't it? A ram's horn, a blast of sound. But you don't understand. The shofar isn't just an instrument, it's a summons. A bridge between worlds, between the seen and the unseen. I was 23 years old when they gave me the honor. The high priest himself placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "You have been found worthy." Worthy. That word haunted me even then. The ceremony was scheduled for the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, the day when the veil between heaven and earth grows thin, the day when the high priest enters the Holy of Holies, where God himself is said to dwell. And I was to sound the shofar at the precise moment he emerged. For weeks I prepared, I fasted, I prayed, I studied the ancient texts, learning the exact pitch, the exact rhythm, the exact intention required. The elders warned me, "Do not deviate, do not improvise, the sound must be pure." I didn't understand why they seemed so afraid. The night before the ceremony, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the temple courts, listening to the whispers of wind through the columns, the distant chanting of priests preparing themselves. The air felt heavy, like the atmosphere before a storm. My father found me there, standing near the court of the Israelites, staring up at the veil that separated us from the Holy of Holies. "Are you afraid?" he asked. I wanted to say no. I wanted to be brave. But the truth slipped out before I could stop it. "Yes." He nodded slowly. "Good. Fear is the beginning of wisdom." "Father, what if I fail? What if the sound isn't right? What if—" "Then you will know," he interrupted, his voice low. "And once you know, you can never go back." I didn't understand what he meant. Not then. The morning of Yom Kippur arrived with a silence that felt unnatural. No birds sang, no wind blew. Even the usual bustle of pilgrims seemed muted, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I put on my white linen garments, spotless, pure. I washed my hands 7 times. I recited the prayers I had memorized since childhood, but my hands were shaking. The high priest, Eleazar, stood before me. He was an old man, his face deeply lined, his eyes like dark wells that had seen too much. "Do you understand your role?" he asked. "Yes, my lord." "Do you understand what the shofar does?" I hesitated. "It announces the presence of the Lord. It calls his attention to—" "No." His voice was sharp. "It doesn't call his attention. It opens something. A door, a passage. And when that door opens—" He didn't finish. He just placed the shofar in my hands. It was heavier than I expected, rough, ancient. I could feel grooves worn into the horn by generations of hands before mine. "When I emerge from the Holy of Holies," Eleazar said, "you will blow 3 times, Tekiah, Shevarim, Teruah. Do you remember?" "Yes, my lord." "And no matter what you see, no matter what you hear, do not stop, do not run, do not look away." My throat tightened. "What will I see?" He stared at me for a long moment. Then he turned and walked toward the veil, his white robes trailing behind him like a ghost. I watched him disappear into the Holy of Holies. And then I was alone. The silence was unbearable. I stood there, shofar in hand, surrounded by hundreds of priests and Levites. But I felt utterly isolated. The air seemed to thicken, pressing against my chest like a great invisible hand. Time stretched. Minutes felt like hours. And then I heard it. A sound from beyond the veil. Not a voice. Not a word. Just a tone. A resonance so deep it vibrated in my bones. It wasn't loud, but it filled everything. It was the sound of something vast. Something infinite. Something that should not be heard by human ears. The other Levites fell to their knees. Some covered their faces. Some wept. I stood frozen, the shofar trembling in my hands. And then the veil moved. Not from wind, not from someone pulling it aside. It rippled, like water disturbed by something massive rising from the depths. Eleazar stepped through, but he wasn't alone. Behind him, through the gap in the veil, I saw it. Not a shape, not a form, but a presence. A brightness that wasn't light, a darkness that wasn't shadow, something that existed in a way that defied comprehension, and it was looking at me. Eleazar's eyes met mine. His lips moved, forming a single word. Now. I lifted the shofar to my lips, and I blew. The first blast, Tekiah, left my lungs in a single sustained note, but the ason sound that came out of the shofar wasn't mine. It was older, deeper. It echoed not just through the temple but through time itself. I felt it reverberate through my chest, my skull, my very soul. It was the sound of creation, of judgment, of something beyond language. And the moment it rang out, everything changed. The air split. I don't know how else to describe it. The atmosphere around me fractured, like glass under pressure, and through the cracks I saw layers, dimensions, realities, stacked on top of each other like pages in a book. In one layer, I was still standing in the temple, surrounded by priests. In another, the temple was empty, abandoned, covered in dust and ash. In another, it was burning. And in yet another, it didn't exist at all, just a barren hilltop under a black sky. I gasped, pulling the shofar away from my lips, but the visions didn't stop. They were bleeding into my sight, overlapping, merging. I saw pilgrims from centuries past walking through the same space I occupied. I saw Roman soldiers marching through the courts. I saw the temple in ruins, then rebuilt, then destroyed again. Keep blowing. Eleazar's voice cut through the chaos. I forced the shofar back to my lips and blew the second blast. Shivarim, 3 broken notes. And this time I heard voices. Thousands of them, screaming, singing, praying, cursing, all at once. Voices from every generation that had ever stood in this place, all compressed into a single moment, all crying, out to the same God, demanding the same answers. Why have you forsaken us? Why do the wicked prosper? Why does suffering exist? Where are you? The voices grew louder, more desperate, until they weren't voices anymore. They were a roar, a cacophony of human anguish so overwhelming that I fell to my knees. But I didn't let go of the shofar, because through the noise I heard something else. A single voice, clear, calm, speaking directly to me. Look up. I obeyed, and I saw it. The presence that had been behind the veil was now above me. Not in the sky, not in the temple. It was everywhere. In the air, in the stone, in the light and the shadow. It was the space between atoms, the breath between words, the silence at the heart of sound. It had no face, no body, but I felt its gaze on me like the weight of 1,000 suns. And then it spoke. Not in Hebrew, not in any language, but I understood. You have opened the door. Now you must see what lies beyond. No. Whispered. No. I can't. You already have. The veil behind Eleazar tore completely. And what came through? I can't describe it. I don't have the words. It wasn't a creature. It wasn't an angel or a demon. It was truth. Raw, unfiltered, absolute truth. And it was more terrible than any nightmare. I saw the foundations of the world. I saw the bones beneath creation. I saw the machinery of existence, the gears and wheels that kept reality turning. And I understood with sickening clarity that we were never supposed to see this. We were never supposed to know. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you know, you can't unknow. And the weight of that knowledge is unbearable. Eleazar was speaking, but I couldn't hear him. His lips moved, his hands gestured, but all I could hear was the humming, a low, endless vibration that seemed to come from the center of the earth. The other Levites were on the ground now, trembling, weeping, some of them clawing at their own, faces as if trying to gouge out their eyes. And I understood why. Because the vision wasn't stopping. It was expanding. Every second that passed, I saw more, understood more. The past and the future collapsing into the present. Every life, every death, every prayer, every sin, all of it compressed into a single crushing moment of awareness. I saw my own death. I saw the fall of Jerusalem. I saw the temple destroyed, rebuilt, destroyed again. I saw the name of God written in fire across the sky, and I saw that name erased. I saw the end of everything, and through it all the presence remained, watching, waiting. Blow the final blast. My hands were numb. My vision was blurred with tears. But I lifted the shofar one last time. And I blew, Teruah. 9 sharp staccato bursts. The sound shattered the vision like a hammer through glass. Silence. Absolute. Total. Deafening silence. I was on the floor of the temple gasping for air, the shofar still clutched in my hands. The other Levites were slowly rising, disoriented, their faces pale and hollow. Eleazar stood over me, his expression unreadable. "Get up," he said quietly. I couldn't move. My limbs felt like stone. "Get up." I forced myself to stand, swaying, my legs barely able to support my weight. Eleazar took the shofar from my hands. He looked at it for a long moment, then handed it to another Levite. "Take him to the lower chambers," he ordered. "Let him rest." "What? What was that?" I croaked. "What did I see?" Eleazar's eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw fear in them. "You saw what we all see, eventually," he said. "The question is, can you live with it?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know. They took me to a small chamber beneath the temple, a stone room lit by a single oil lamp. They laid me on a mat and left me there, alone, with nothing but the flickering shadows on the wall. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it again. The veil tearing, the layers of reality splitting apart, the presence that had no form but was somehow everything, and the knowledge, that unbearable, crushing knowledge. I saw the truth of existence, and it was too vast, too complex, too indifferent for a human mind to hold. I understood now why the elders looked so haunted, why the high priests aged so quickly, why some Levites went mad after serving in the Holy of Holies. Because once you see behind the veil, you can never look at the world the same way again. Hours passed, or maybe days. Time had lost all meaning. Eventually the door opened. My father stepped inside. He carried a bowl of water and a piece of bread. He set them down beside me and sat in silence for a long time. Finally he spoke. "You saw it?" It wasn't a question. I nodded. "And now you want to run?" Another nod. He sighed deeply. "I ran too. When I was your age. I blew the shofar once, just once, and I saw enough. I fled the temple. I went to the wilderness. I tried to forget." "Did you?" I whispered. "No." His voice was heavy with regret. "You can't forget something like that. You can only learn to live with it." "How?" He didn't answer immediately. He stared at the oil lamp, watching the flame dance. "By understanding that what you saw, it wasn't meant to destroy you. It was meant to prepare you." "Prepare me for what?" "For what comes next." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" My father looked at me, his eyes filled with a sorrow I had never seen before. "The shofar doesn't just open doors," he said quietly. "It also closes them. And once a door is opened, something has to close it again." "I don't understand." "You will." He stood and walked to the door, pausing at the threshold. "Rest, my son. Tomorrow you'll be summoned again." "What? No, I can't, I won't." "You will," he said firmly, "because you're the only one who can." And then he was gone. I didn't rest. I paced the chamber, my mind racing, my heart pounding. I couldn't go back. I couldn't face that presence again. I couldn't blow the shofar again. But even as I thought it, I knew it was a lie. Because something had changed inside me. The vision hadn't just shown me the truth of existence, it had shown me my purpose, my role in the grand design. And whether I liked it or not, I was bound to it now. The shofar had chosen me, or perhaps I had chosen it. The next morning they came for me, not my father, not Eleazar, but 2 priests I had never seen before, tall, silent men with eyes like stone. "It's time," one of them said. "Time for what?" "The second ceremony." My blood turned to ice. "What second ceremony?" They didn't answer. They just led me through the labyrinthine corridors beneath the temple, deeper and deeper, until we reached a place I didn't recognize. A door carved with symbols I had never seen before. Ancient, pre-Mosaic, older than the Torah itself. One of the priests placed his hand on the door. "Beyond this," he said, "is the truth that even the high priest does not speak of. The truth that only the shofar blowers are permitted to know." "Why?" I demanded. "Why me? Why us?" The priest looked at me with something that might have been pity. "Because you heard the sound," he said. "And once you hear it, you can never be free of it." He pushed the door open, and I saw what lay beyond. The chamber was circular, carved from a single piece of black stone. No seams, no cracks, just smooth obsidian walls that seemed to absorb the eye, light from the torches lining the perimeter. In the center of the room was an altar, but it wasn't like the altars upstairs. This one was older, cruder, covered in markings that predated Hebrew, predated Aramaic, predated every written language I knew. And on the altar was another shofar, but this one was different. It was white, bone white, polished to a gleam, and it radiated a presence that made my skin crawl. "What is this place?" I whispered. The priest who had led me here stepped forward. "This," he said, "is where it all began. Before the temple, before Solomon, before Moses, before Abraham." "That's impossible." "Is it?" He gestured to the altar. "This place existed before the covenant, before the priesthood, before even the name of God was known." I stared at him, uncomprehending. "The shofar you blew yesterday," he continued, "was a key. It opened a door between our world and the realm beyond. But every door has two sides, and on the other side," he paused, "something is waiting." My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. "What's waiting?" "The question you should be asking," the priest said, "is who?" He walked to the altar and picked up the white shofar, holding it reverently. "This is the first shofar," he said. "The one that was blown at the moment of creation. The sound that separated light from darkness, order from chaos, being from nothingness. That's a myth. A story. All stories are true," he interrupted. "They're just told poorly." He handed me the shofar. It was cold, heavier than it looked, and the moment my fingers touched it, I felt a jolt of recognition, like touching something that had always been mine. "When you blow this," the priest said, "you will complete what you started yesterday. You will close the door, seal the veil, restore the boundary. And if I don't?" His expression darkened. "Then the door stays open, and what lies beyond will come through." "What lies beyond?" I demanded. "Stop speaking in riddles. Tell me the truth." The priest was silent for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, "God." I almost dropped the shofar. "What? Not the God of mercy? Not the God of love? Not the God they pray to upstairs?" He gestured toward the ceiling, toward the temple above. "The real God. The one who existed before creation. The one who is vast and terrible and utterly indifferent to human suffering." I shook my head. "No, that's not. Do you think the God who drowned the Asiosio world cares about your prayers?" The priest said harshly. "Do you think the God who commanded Abraham to kill his own son is moved by your tears? Then why worship him at all?" "Because we have no choice." His voice was filled with a weary resignation. "Because if we don't maintain the rituals, if we don't keep the veil in place, then the full force of that presence, the full unfiltered truth of what God is, will pour into this world, and humanity will be obliterated. Not by wrath, not by judgment, but by sheer incomprehensible existence." I looked down at the shofar in my hands. "You're saying the rituals are a barrier, a protection?" "Yes." "And if I blow this, the barrier holds?" "Yes." "And if I don't, then the door stays open, and we all see what you saw, every living soul on earth, all at once." The weight of the shofar felt unbearable now. "Why me?" I whispered. "Why was I chosen?" "Because you were strong enough to survive the first vision," the priest said. "Most who see it go mad, or they die. But you held on. You kept your mind, and that means you're strong enough to finish this." I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the white shofar, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me. Part of me wanted to refuse, to throw the shofar down and run, to let the door stay open, to let the truth pour out and consume everything, because maybe that was what we deserved. Maybe humanity needed to see the truth, to understand that we were not the center of creation, that our prayers were whispers in an endless void, that God, if he existed at all, was not the loving Father we imagined, but something far older, far stranger, and far more terrifying. But then I thought of my father, my mother, my sister, the children I had seen playing in the temple courts, the pilgrims who came from across the world, seeking hope, seeking meaning, seeking comfort. And I realized the truth would destroy them. Not physically, but spiritually. They would lose everything: faith, purpose, the belief that their lives mattered. And maybe that was a mercy, to let them live in the illusion, to keep the veil in place, to protect them from the unbearable weight of knowing. I lifted the shofar to my lips. The priest stepped back, his face unreadable. I took a breath, and I blew. The sound that came out was unlike anything I had ever heard. It wasn't loud. It was total. It filled not just the room, but the space. Between moments, the gap between heartbeats, the silence at the core of sound itself. And as it rang out, I felt the door closing. The presence on the other side, vast, infinite, indifferent, began to recede. The layers of reality that had been bleeding together started to separate. The veil grew solid again. But in the final moment, before the door sealed completely, I heard a voice. Not the voice of God, but the voice of something older. You have bought them time, but one day the veil will tear again. And on that day there will be no one to blow the shofar. The sound faded. The door closed, and I was left standing in the silent chamber, the white shofar still in my hands. The priest placed a hand on my shoulder. It's done, he said quietly. I nodded, numb. What happens now? Now, he said. You live with what you know. You serve. You keep the secret. And when the time comes, you train another to do what you did. And if I can't? He didn't answer. He just took the shofar from my hands and placed it back on the altar. And I understood. This was my life now. Not a curse. Not a blessing. Just a burden. The burden of knowing the truth. And the responsibility of keeping it hidden. I left the chamber that day and returned to the world above. To the sunlight, to the prayers, to the rituals. But I was never the same. Every time I heard the shofar blown, I felt the echo of that moment. Every time I stood in the temple, I saw the layers beneath the surface. Every time someone prayed, I wondered if they knew how fragile the veil truly was. Years passed. I married, I had children, I grew old. But I never forgot. And when my son came of age, I began to teach him. Not the prayers, not the rituals, but the truth. Because someone has to know. Someone has to be ready. For the day when the veil tears again. And the shofar must be blown. End. This confession was recorded by an unnamed scribe in the final days of the Second Temple, before its destruction in 70 CE. The manuscript was discovered in a sealed chamber beneath the ruins in 1947, alongside the Dead Sea Scrolls. It has never been made public. Until now. 30 years have passed since that day in the chamber beneath the temple. 30 years of carrying this weight, this knowledge, this curse. I am an old man now. My beard is gray. My hands shake when I lift the cup during prayers. The other Levites look at me with a mixture of respect and pity. They know I once blew the shofar during Yom Kippur, but they don't know what I saw. Only a handful of us do. And one by one, we're dying. Eleazar passed away 7 years ago. The priest who led me to the black chamber died in his sleep 3 winters past. My father held on longer than any of them, but last month I found him collapsed in his room, clutching a scroll covered in symbols I recognized from that altar. His final words to me were, "Don't let the line break." I understood what he meant. The knowledge must be passed down. The burden must be carried. Because if it isn't, if the line of shofar blowers is broken, then there will be no one to close the door when it opens again. And it will open again. I can feel it. My son's name is Micah. He's 18 now. The same age I was when they first handed me the shofar. He's strong, intelligent, devout. Everything a Levite should be. But he's also stubborn, questioning. He doesn't accept tradition blindly like I once did. And that terrifies me. Because what I'm about to ask him to do, it requires faith. Not in God, not the God people pray to anyway, but in the necessity of the veil, in the importance of keeping the truth hidden. I don't know if he'll understand, but I have to try. I waited until after the evening prayers, when the temple had emptied, and only the night watchman remained. I found Micah in the court of the Levites, practicing his psalms, his voice echoing softly off the stone columns. "Micah," I called. He turned, surprised. "Father, I thought you'd gone home. I need to speak with you." Something in my tone must have warned him. His expression shifted, curious, cautious. "Is everything all right?" "No," I said honestly. "It hasn't been all right for 30 years. I led him down. Not to the main chambers, not to the places he knew, but deeper. Through corridors he'd never seen, past doors he didn't know existed. "Father, where are we going?" "Somewhere you need to see." He followed in silence. his footsteps echoing behind mine. I could feel his confusion, his growing unease. When we reached the door, the one carved with ancient symbols, he stopped. "What is this place?" I placed my hand on the door, feeling the cold stone beneath my palm. "This," I said, "is where the real work of the temple happens. Not the prayers, not the sacrifices. This." I pushed the door open. Micah's reaction was exactly what mine had been 3 decades earlier. Horror, fascination, the instinctive sense that he was looking at something he shouldn't see. The black chamber was unchanged. The altar still stood in the center, the white shofar resting on it, gleaming faintly in the torchlight. "Father, what is this?" I closed the door behind us. "Sit down, Micah. I have something to tell you. And once I tell you, everything will change." He sat slowly, never taking his eyes off the altar. And I told him everything. I spoke for hours. I told him about the vision, about the layers of reality, about the presence beyond the veil, about the truth that lies beneath creation, the truth that would obliterate humanity if it were ever fully revealed. I told him about the first shofar, about the door that must be opened and closed, about the burden carried by those who know. And I told him that now it was his turn. When I finished, he sat in silence for a long time. Then he said very quietly, "You're asking me to lie." "No," I said. "I'm asking you to protect. By keeping people ignorant. By keeping them alive." He looked at me with something I'd never seen in his eyes before. "Disappointment. All my life," he said. "You taught me that truth was sacred. That knowledge was a gift from God. And now you're telling me that the greatest truth of all must be hidden?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because the truth is too much, Micah. It's too vast, too terrible. It would crush them. Maybe they deserve to be crushed." His words hit me like a physical blow. "You don't mean that." "Don't I?" He stood, pacing the chamber. "Look around you, Father. Look at what we've become. We pretend to worship a God of love and mercy, but we slaughter animals on altars. We collect taxes from the poor. We enforce laws that benefit the powerful and crush the weak. And all of it is justified by faith, by the belief that we're doing God's will." "Micah, but what if there is no will?" he demanded. "What if God doesn't care? What if everything we do, every prayer, every ritual, every sacrifice, is meaningless?" "It's not meaningless," I said firmly. "It keeps the veil in place. It protects a lie." His voice echoed through the chamber. "And you want me to spend my life maintaining that lie? Just like you? Just like your father? Just like every shofar blower before us?" I stood, meeting his gaze. "Yes," I said, "because the alternative is worse." "How do you know?" he challenged. "Have you ever considered that maybe, just maybe, people deserve the truth? That maybe facing reality, however terrible, is better than living in ignorance?" "I've considered it every day for 30 years, I said quietly. "And every day I've come to the same conclusion. The truth would destroy them, not physically, but spiritually. They would lose everything, hope, meaning, purpose. And without those things, what's the point of living?" Micah stared at me for a long moment. Then he turned and walked toward the door. "Micah, wait. I need to think," he said without looking back. And then he was gone. I stood alone in the black chamber, staring at the white shofar, feeling the weight of failure pressing down on me. I had lost him. And if I couldn't convince my own son, then who would carry the burden after I was gone? I sank to my knees, overwhelmed by a despair I hadn't felt since that day 30 years ago. The line is breaking, I thought. The chain is coming undone. And somewhere beyond the veil, I felt the door tremble. Waiting. 3 days passed. Micah avoided me. He stopped coming to the temple. He stopped praying. I searched for him, at home, in the markets, in the places he used to go. But he had vanished. On the 4th day, I received a message. A single piece of parchment delivered by a street boy who disappeared before I could question him. The message was in Micah's handwriting. "Meet me at the chamber, tonight, midnight. I've made my decision." I arrived early, my heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. Maybe he had changed his mind. Maybe he understood now. Maybe... But when I pushed open the door to the black chamber, I knew immediately that something was wrong. Micah was standing at the altar, and he was holding the white shofar. "Micah, put that down." "I've been thinking about what you said," he interrupted, not looking at me. "About the truth, about the veil, about protecting people from knowledge they can't handle. And I think you're wrong. My blood turned cold. Micah, listen to me. No, you listen. He turned to face me, his eyes blazing with a fervor I'd never seen before. For 3 days I've wrestled with this. I've prayed. I've meditated. I've searched every text, every scroll, every prophecy, and I've come to a conclusion. What conclusion? That the veil isn't protection. It's imprisonment. I took a step forward. Micah, you don't understand what you're saying. I understand perfectly. He lifted the shofar. You and every shofar blower before you have been jailers, keeping humanity locked in ignorance, keeping them small, keeping them afraid. We're keeping them alive. Are we? He challenged. Or are we keeping them from becoming what they could be? What are you talking about? The texts I found, he said, his voice trembling with excitement. Ancient writings, pre-Mosaic. They speak of a time before the veil, a time when humanity communed directly with the divine, when we weren't separated from God, when we were God. That's madness. Is it? Or is it the truth you've been hiding? He gripped the shofar tighter. What if the door isn't meant to be closed? What if it's meant to stay open? What if the vision you saw, the layers of reality, the infinite presence, what if that's what we're supposed to experience? You'll kill them, Micah. You'll kill everyone. Or I'll free them. And before I could stop him, he lifted the shofar to his lips. No! I lunged forward, but I was too slow, too old, too broken. The sound erupted from the shofar like a thunderclap. But it was wrong. Not the controlled, measured tone I had produced 30 years ago. This was wild, chaotic, untamed. The chamber shook, the walls cracked, the torches flared and died, plunging us into darkness lit only by a sickly phosphorescent glow emanating from the altar. And the door opened. Not slowly, not gradually, violently. The veil between worlds shattered, and the presence poured through like water through a broken dam. I fell to my knees, overwhelmed by the same vision I'd experienced before. But magnified 1,000-fold. The layers of reality exploding outward. The past and future collapsing into the present. Every life, every death, every moment of existence compressed into a single, unbearable instant. But this time, it wasn't contained. It wasn't controlled. It was everywhere. I could feel it spreading beyond the chamber, beyond the temple, racing through Jerusalem like a plague, infecting every mind, every soul, every living thing with the truth. And the screaming began. Not just in the chamber, not just in the temple, everywhere. I could hear it. Thousands of voices crying out in terror and madness as the veil tore away and they saw what I had seen, what Micah had unleashed, the full, unfiltered reality of existence, the indifference of God, the meaninglessness of suffering, the futility of prayer, the weight of infinite knowledge crushing finite minds. Micah was standing at the altar, tears streaming down his face, the shofar still in his hands. I thought, he whispered. I thought they would understand. I thought they would transcend. They're human, Micah, I said hoarsely. They were never meant to carry this. Then what do we do? I staggered to my feet, every muscle in my body screaming in protest. We close the door. How? I've already blown the shofar. Then blow it again. He stared at me in horror. I can't. I don't know how. You have to. I gripped his shoulders. You opened the door. Now you have to close it. But the sound. I don't know the right tone. Neither did I. I took the shofar from his trembling hands. But I learned. I lifted the first shofar to my lips. My old cracked lips. My failing lungs. My body that had carried this burden for 30 years and was now breaking under the weight. And I blew. The sound that emerged was weak. Thin. Nothing like the powerful blast I'd produced in my youth. But it was enough. Because this time I wasn't just closing the door. I was sealing it. Forever. The vision began to contract. The layers of reality pulling back together. The presence retreating beyond the veil. But it fought back. I could feel it resisting, pushing against the sound, trying to keep the door open, trying to flood the world with its unbearable truth. And I knew with horrible certainty that I couldn't hold it. Not alone. Micah, I gasped. Help me. He hesitated for only a moment. Then he placed his hands over mine on the shofar, and together we blew. The sound doubled, tripled, became something beyond mere noise, a force, a will, a defiant cry against the infinite. The presence recoiled. The door began to close. And in that final moment, I heard the voice again, the one I'd heard 30 years ago. But this time it wasn't speaking to me. It was speaking to Micah. You think you've won, but the door is never truly closed. It will open again, and again, and again, until one day there will be no one left to seal it. The voice faded, the door slammed shut, and the chamber fell. Silent. Micah and I collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, the shofar clattering between us. Outside, the screaming had stopped. The veil was restored. The world was saved. But at what cost? I looked at my son, his face pale, his hands trembling, his eyes haunted by the knowledge of what he'd done. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry, Father." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "I know. What do we do now?" I picked up the shofar, feeling its weight one last time. "Now," I said quietly, "we do what has always been done. We keep the secret. We maintain the veil. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. But for how long?" I looked at the sealed door, at the cracks in the walls, at the faint phosphorescent glow that still lingered around the altar. "For as long as we can," I said. "And when we can't anymore?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know. We left the chamber that night and sealed the door behind us. Neither of us spoke of what had happened. Neither of us ever returned to that place. But the knowledge remained. The burden remained. And Micah, like me before him, learned to carry it. Years later, when I was on my deathbed, he came to me one final time. "Father," he said quietly, "the door, it's trembling again. I knew it would be. Then you know what to do." He nodded slowly. "I'm training my daughter," he said. "She's strong, stronger than I was. She'll be ready." "Good. But Father, what happens when the line finally breaks? When there's no one left, who knows? When the door opens and there's no one to close it?" I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of years pressing down on me. "Then," I whispered, "the truth will be revealed. And humanity will face what we've been protecting them from all along. And what will happen to them?" I thought of the screaming, the madness, the collapse of every certainty. "They'll either transcend," I said softly, "or they'll be destroyed. Which do you think it will be?" I opened my eyes one last time and looked at my son, my beautiful, broken, burdened son. "I think," I said, "that we'll never know, because we'll be long dead before the final door opens." "Is that a comfort?" "No," I admitted, "but it's all we have. I died that night, but the line continued. Micah trained his daughter. She trained her son. And so on. Generation after generation, carrying the secret, maintaining the veil, blowing the shofar when the door trembles. Until one day, perhaps tomorrow, perhaps in 1,000 years, the line will break, the door will open, and the truth will be revealed.